Cowboy, remember me? I'm the Apache girl you saved years ago. I've returned to marry you. The plasma bolt missed Jake Carter's head by 3 inches, scorching the metal hull behind him. He dove behind a cargo container as another volley tore through the air where he'd been standing. The mining station on Kepler 442b was supposed to be routine, a quick salvage run for rare earth deposits. Instead, he'd walked straight into a Kral ambush. Jake rolled to his left, drawing his modified energy revolver in one smooth motion. The weapon hummed to life, its charging coils glowing blue in the dim station lighting. He'd been a frontier scout for 12 years, ever since Earth's colonial expansion pushed into contested space. The Kral didn't take kindly to humans mining their territory, even if the territory had been abandoned for centuries. 3 Kral warriors emerged from the shadows, their chitinous armor reflecting the emergency lights. They moved with predatory grace, mandibles clicking in what Jake had learned was their version of laughter. He fired twice, the energy bolts catching the nearest warrior in the chest. It stumbled, but didn't fall. Damn their thick hides. A shadow dropped from above, landing between Jake and the advancing Kral. The figure moved like liquid mercury, a blur of motion that Jake's eyes could barely track. 2 Kral went down before they could react, their weapons clattering to the deck. The third raised its plasma rifle, but a blade flashed in the darkness, and the alien's weapon fell in pieces. The figure turned, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. She stood barely 5 feet tall, wearing combat armor that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy. Her face was human, distinctly so, with high cheekbones and dark eyes that burned with fierce intelligence. But her armor bore markings he recognized from his childhood on the Arizona colony, patterns that reminded him of ancient Earth tribes. "You don't remember me," she said, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't quite place. "But I remember you, Jake Carter. More Kral were coming." Jake could hear their clicking communication echoing through the station corridors. "Lady, I don't know who you are, but we need to move now." She smiled, and something in that expression sent a jolt of recognition through him. 17 years ago, on the colony world of New, you were 19, just started as a scout. I was 12, separated from my family during a sandstorm. You found me, shared your water, led me back to the settlement. You saved my life. Jake's mind raced back through the years. New Mesa, his first assignment. The little girl with fierce eyes who'd been lost in the desert. "Kaya? My name is Kaya Redhawk," she said as explosions rocked the station above them, "and I've crossed 3 star systems to find you. We need to talk, but first, we survive." She tossed him a device that looked like a grenade but pulsed with strange energy. EMP burst. On my mark. The Kral rounded the corner, at least a dozen of them, weapons raised. Kaya moved forward, her blade singing through the air. Jake had never seen anyone fight like that, a perfect blend of ancient technique and future technology. She was everywhere at once, her movements impossibly fast. "Now!" she shouted. Jake triggered the device. A wave of electromagnetic energy pulsed outward, and every piece of Kral technology went dead. Their armor locked up, their weapons died, and they became sitting targets. Kaya finished the job with brutal efficiency. In the sudden silence, she turned to him. "I need to explain why I'm here, why I've been searching for you." "Make it quick," Jake said, checking his weapons charge. "More will come. My people, the Apache Nation of the Stars, we've evolved beyond what humanity knows. When you saved me that day, you didn't just save a girl. You saved the daughter of our war chief. In our culture, a life debt must be repaid. I've spent years training, becoming worthy." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "I've come to marry you, Jake Carter, to bind our peoples together. And right now, you need to decide if you trust me, because there's an entire Kral battle fleet approaching this station, and we have exactly 10 minutes to reach my ship." Jake stared at her, his mind struggling to process her words. Marriage? Alliance? He'd expected to die on this station, and now this woman from his past was offering him something he couldn't begin to understand. "Your ship better be fast," he finally said. Kaya's smile was fierce and beautiful. "Cowboy, you have no idea what I'm capable of." The station shuddered as the Kral fleet entered orbit. Kaya grabbed his hand, and together they ran toward whatever future awaited them. Behind them, the mining station began to tear itself apart under the assault. Ahead, through the chaos and destruction, Jake could see the docking bay where Kaya's ship waited. He'd saved a girl 17 years ago without a second thought. Now that girl, grown into a warrior beyond anything he'd imagined, had returned to change his life forever. The frontier was full of surprises, but this one might be the biggest of them all. They burst into the docking bay as the first hull breach alarms began to wail. Kaya's ship was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It seemed to be crafted from living metal, its surface rippling with patterns that reminded him of ancient tribal art mixed with technology that shouldn't exist. The craft was small, built for speed rather than firepower, with swept-back wings that hummed with barely contained energy. "Get in," Kaya commanded, practically throwing him toward the boarding ramp. "We've got maybe 3 minutes before this whole section decompresses." Jake didn't argue. He'd learned long ago that survival meant trusting your instincts, and right now his instincts were screaming at him to follow this mysterious woman who'd appeared from his past like a ghost made flesh. The ship's interior was just as strange as its exterior. The walls seemed to pulse with a soft light, and the controls were a blend of touchscreens and what looked like ancient symbols carved into living crystal. Kaya slid into the pilot's seat with practiced ease, her hands dancing across the controls. "Strap in, cowboy," she said, and Jake heard the engines building to a scream. This is going to be rough. The ship lifted off, just as the crawl breaching charges detonated. The entire docking bay erupted in flames and debris, but Kaya's ship shot through the chaos like a bullet, threading between falling girders and explosive decompression with impossible precision. Jake gripped his restraints as G-forces slammed him back into his seat. Outside the viewports, he could see the crawl fleet, massive wedge-shaped vessels that bristled with weapons. They were already firing, streams of plasma tearing through space toward the fleeing ship. Kaya banked hard, the ship responding to her touch like it was an extension of her body. Energy bolts passed so close Jake could feel the heat through the hull. "They're tracking us," Jake warned, watching the tactical display. "We can't outrun a whole fleet." "I'm not trying to outrun them," Kaya replied, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. "I'm trying to get us far enough out for the jump." "Jump? You have faster-than-light capabilities on this thing? My people have capabilities that would make Earth's best engineers weep with envy," she said. "The question is whether we can survive long enough to use them." A proximity alarm shrieked. One of the crawl cruisers had moved to intercept, cutting off their escape vector. Its forward guns were charging, building to a strike that would vaporize them in an instant. Kaya's hands moved in a blur across the controls, and suddenly the ship was spinning, diving, climbing in patterns that defied physics. Jake's stomach lurched as the artificial gravity struggled to compensate. He was a frontier scout, used to rough rides, but this was beyond anything he'd experienced. Come on, Kaya muttered, her eyes locked on a readout Jake couldn't understand. "Just a few more seconds." The crawl cruiser fired. A lance of superheated plasma filled space where they'd been a heartbeat before. Kaya had anticipated the shot, moved before the weapon discharged, as if she could read the enemy's intentions. "Now!" she shouted, slamming her hand down on a crystal set into the control panel. The universe twisted. Jake felt like his atoms were being pulled apart and reassembled simultaneously. Colors that didn't exist in normal space flashed past the viewports. Sound became light became music, and for one eternal instant, he understood everything and nothing at once. Then it was over. They hung in normal space, the stars arranged in completely different patterns. Behind them, there was no sign of the crawl fleet, no sign of Kepler 442b, nothing but the endless void of deep space. Jake fought down nausea, his hands shaking from the adrenaline crash. What the hell was that? "Quantum slip drive," Kaya said, looking tired but satisfied. "We just jumped 17 light-years in 3 seconds. The crawl can't follow us here." She unbuckled her restraints and turned to face him fully. "Now we can talk." Jake took a deep breath, trying to center himself. Everything that had happened in the last 20 minutes seemed impossible, from the ambush, to the rescue, to the escape. And at the center of it all was this woman who claimed to remember him from nearly 2 decades ago. "All right," he said. "Start talking. Who are you really, and what's this about marriage?" Kaya moved to a storage compartment and pulled out 2 containers of water. She handed one to Jake and sat down across from him, her posture relaxed but alert. "My full name is Kaya Redhawk, daughter of Chief Marcus Redhawk, leader of the Apache Nation of the Stars. We're descendants of Earth's indigenous peoples who left during the first colonial waves. While the rest of humanity spread across the galaxy in their metal cities and corporate stations, we went our own way. I've heard rumors," Jake admitted. "Stories about colonies that went dark, developed their own cultures. The corporations call them lost settlements." "We're not lost," Kaya said sharply. "We chose a different path. While Earth was busy strip mining planets and fighting territorial wars with species like the Crawl, we studied the old ways, adapted them to new realities. We learned to live with the galaxy instead of conquering it. And that ship of yours, that technology, comes from understanding rather than exploitation. The crystals that power our drives grow naturally on certain worlds. The living metal bonds with its pilot. It's all sustainable, all in balance." She paused, her dark eyes studying him. "But that's not why I'm here." I'm here because of what you did for me. Jake shook his head. I found a lost kid in a desert and brought her home. Any decent person would have done the same. But you did it, Kaya insisted. No hesitation, no expectation of reward. In my culture, that creates a bond, a debt that must be honored. I've spent the last 5 years earning the right to repay that debt. By marrying me? That doesn't make sense. Kaya stood, pacing the small cabin. Among my people, when someone saves the life of a chief's child, they become family. The traditional way to formalize that bond is through marriage, uniting bloodlines. But it's more than tradition now, Jake. The galaxy is changing. The Krull are expanding aggressively. The corporations are exploiting worlds faster than ever. My people need allies, need connections to those who understand both the new ways and the old. And you think I'm that connection? I know you are. I've watched your career, Jake Carter. You're not like other corporate scouts. You respect the worlds you visit, you treat aliens with dignity, you've turned down lucrative mining contracts when they would have destroyed indigenous ecosystems. You're a cowboy in the truest sense, a man who lives by his own code. Jake rubbed his face, exhaustion finally catching up with him. This is insane. You tracked me across 3 star systems, rescued me from certain death, and now you're proposing marriage because I helped you when you were 12? Yes, Kaya said simply, though to be clear, I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm asking you to come with me, meet my people, understand what we're offering. If after that you want to walk away, I'll take you anywhere in the galaxy you want to go. No strings, no obligations. And if I say yes, then you become part of something bigger than corporate expansion and territorial disputes. You become a bridge between worlds, between cultures. You help us build something new. Jake looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since she'd appeared in that chaos on the mining station. She was young, maybe 29 or 30, but her eyes held the kind of wisdom that came from real experience. She moved like a warrior but spoke like a diplomat. She was offering him something he'd never even known he wanted, an escape from the endless cycle of corporate contracts and frontier survival. How long to reach your homeworld? He asked. Kaya's smile was radiant. 2 days in quantum slip. We'll arrive at the gathering, a meeting of all the nation's leaders. They're waiting to meet the man who showed kindness without expectation, who proved that humanity's better nature still exists. No pressure then, Jake said dryly. I wouldn't have crossed the galaxy for someone who couldn't handle pressure, Kaya replied. She extended her hand. So what do you say, cowboy? Ready for the ride of your life? Jake thought about the mining station burning behind them, about the corporate life he'd been living, about the chance to be part of something different. He thought about the fierce 12-year-old girl he'd guided through a sandstorm, and the incredible woman she'd become. He took her hand. Let's see what you've got to show me. The ship's engines hummed to life, preparing for another quantum slip. Outside the viewports, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance. Somewhere out there, in a part of the galaxy the corporations had written off as dead space, an entire civilization waited. A civilization that remembered the old ways while embracing the new, that valued honor and balance over profit and expansion. Jake Carter had spent 12 years as a frontier scout, always moving, never settling, searching for something he couldn't name. Maybe, just maybe, he'd finally found it in the most unexpected way possible. A debt of honor, a promise of marriage, and a woman who'd traveled across the stars to find him. The universe, he was learning, had a sense of humor and timing that no one could predict. The quantum slip drive engaged, and they vanished into the spaces between spaces, heading toward a future neither of them could fully imagine. 2 days in quantum slip gave Jake plenty of time to learn just how much he didn't know about the galaxy. Kaya proved to be an excellent teacher, patient when he asked stupid questions, and enthusiastic when he grasped new concepts quickly. The ship itself was a marvel, responding to her thoughts as much as her physical controls, a symbiotic relationship between pilot and machine that seemed more like partnership than operation. The living metal bonds with its primary pilot during a ceremony, Kaya explained as they floated in the observation bubble she'd extended from the ship's hull. Around them, the strange non-space of quantum slip created patterns of light and darkness that shouldn't exist. It takes 3 months of meditation and attunement. The metal learns your rhythms, your instincts, your way of thinking. After that, flying becomes as natural as breathing. And anyone can learn this? Jake asked, watching her hand rest gently on the metallic surface. It rippled under her touch, almost affectionately. Anyone with patience and respect for the bond. My people believe that technology should enhance life, not replace it. This ship isn't just a tool, it's a companion. It's kept me alive through battles, sabotage, and navigation hazards that would have killed anyone else. How many battles have you fought? Kaya's expression grew somber. More than I'd like. The Krull aren't our only problem. There are pirates, corporate raiders, and worse things in the deep dark. My father sent me out 5 years ago to become a warrior, to prove myself worthy of leadership. I've seen things that would give you nightmares, Jake, but I've also seen wonders, beauty beyond description, worlds where life has evolved in ways that make you question everything you thought you knew about the universe. Is that why you use blades instead of just guns? Some kind of warrior tradition? She pulled a knife from her belt, the blade shimmering with the same energy that powered her ship. Partly tradition, partly practicality. Energy weapons can fail, ammunition runs out, but a blade bonded to you never fails. This weapon has been in my family for 4 generations, passed down from warrior to warrior. The edge is monomolecular, sharp enough to cut through almost anything, and the energy field makes it even more effective. Jake watched her twirl the blade with casual expertise. You said I'd meet your father at the gathering. What should I expect? Marcus Redhawk is. Kaya paused, searching for words. He's old-fashioned in some ways, progressive in others. He believes in the old codes of honor but understands we need to adapt to survive. When I told him I wanted to find you to repay the life debt, he was skeptical. He thought I was too young, too impulsive, but I convinced him that this was necessary, that you represented something important. What if he doesn't like me? Then we'll have problems, Kaya admitted. But I think he will. You have an honest face, Jake Carter, and honest faces are rare in this galaxy. The quantum slip drive began its descent cycle, preparing to drop them back into normal space. Kaya moved to the pilot's seat, her hands already dancing across the controls in anticipation. Jake strapped in, watching the patterns of light outside shift and change. 1 minute to emergence, Kaya announced. Prepare for transition. This time, Jake was ready for the gut-wrenching twist of reality. He focused on his breathing, riding out the nausea as the universe reassembled itself around them. When his vision cleared, he found himself staring at something that took his breath away. The planet before them was beautiful in a way that corporate worlds never achieved. Its oceans were deep blue-green, its continents covered in forests and grasslands that looked untouched by industrialization. 3 moons hung in orbit, each one home to what looked like orbital stations built from the same living metal as Kaya's ship. But it was the space around the planet that truly amazed him. Ships filled the orbital space, hundreds of them, each one unique in design, but all sharing that organic quality that made them seem grown rather than built. They ranged from small fighters like Kaya's to massive vessels that could have been living asteroids shaped into purpose. They moved in perfect harmony, like a school of fish, creating patterns that were both beautiful and functional. Welcome to Redstone, Kaya said softly. Our homeworld. It's incredible, Jake breathed. How many people live here? On the planet? About 5 million. In the system? Maybe twice that. We've never believed in the megacities that corporations build. We prefer smaller communities, sustainable populations that work with the land instead of consuming it. A communication signal pinged, and Kaya responded in a language Jake didn't recognize, fluid and musical. The response came back, and she smiled. My father wants to meet you immediately. He's at the Central Gathering Lodge on the planet's surface. Should I be nervous? Absolutely, Kaya said cheerfully. But don't let it show. My people respect courage. The descent through Redstone's atmosphere was smooth, the ship moving like a bird on the wind. As they dropped below the cloud layer, Jake could see the settlements scattered across the landscape. They weren't the sprawling urban masses he was used to, but carefully planned communities that seemed to grow out of the land itself. Buildings made from what looked like grown timber and shaped stone, arranged in patterns that followed the natural contours of the terrain. No massive factories, Jake observed. No strip mining, no industrial complexes. How do you maintain your technology? We manufacture what we need, but not more. Why build 1,000 ships when 100 will do? Why extract resources faster than they can replenish? The corporations think we're primitive, inefficient. They don't understand that efficiency isn't just about production, it's about sustainability. They landed in a clearing near what looked like a massive wooden hall, its roof carved with intricate designs that told stories in visual form. People were gathering, hundreds of them, all ages and backgrounds but united by something Jake couldn't quite define. There was a strength to them. A confidence that came from knowing exactly who they were and what they stood for. Kaya powered down the ship and turned to him. Last chance to back out, cowboy. Once we walk out there, you're committed to seeing this through. Jake checked his gear, made sure his energy revolver was secure. I've never backed out of anything in my life. Not about to start now. Good answer. The boarding ramp lowered, and they stepped out into warm afternoon air that smelled of pine and grass. The crowd parted, creating a path toward the great hall. Jake felt hundreds of eyes on him, assessing, judging, curious. He kept his head up, his stride confident. If these people valued courage, he'd show them he had plenty. At the hall's entrance stood a man who could only be Marcus Redhawk. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with gray streaking through his black hair. His face was weathered by decades of experience, marked with traditional tattoos that told their own story. He wore simple clothing, but his bearing made it clear he was a leader. His eyes, the same fierce intelligence Jake saw in Kaya, locked onto him with an intensity that felt physical. "Father," Kaya said, bowing her head slightly. "I present Jake Carter, the man who saved my life 17 years ago, the man I have chosen to honor our debt." Marcus Redhawk studied Jake for a long moment, and Jake met his gaze without flinching. Finally, the older man spoke, his voice deep and resonant. "Welcome to Redstone, Jake Carter. My daughter speaks highly of you. I hope her judgment proves sound."
"I hope so too, sir," Jake replied.
"I appreciate the invitation, though I'll admit this isn't what I expected when I woke up 2 days ago." A slight smile tugged at Marcus's lips. Life rarely meets our expectations. "Come, we have much to discuss, and the gathering begins soon. You'll meet the leaders of all our settlements, hear their concerns, and hopefully understand what we're building here." They entered the great hall, and Jake found himself in a space that blended ancient and modern perfectly. The walls were carved wood, telling stories of Earth's past and the journey to the stars, but holographic displays floated in the air, showing star charts, resource reports, and communication feeds from across the galaxy. Long tables were arranged in a circle, with seats for perhaps 200 people. "This is where we make decisions," Marcus explained. "Not through corporate hierarchy or political maneuvering, but through consensus and debate. Every settlement sends representatives, every voice is heard, and we decide together what's best for our people." "Sounds time-consuming," Jake said honestly. "It is. But it also means that when we commit to something, we're all committed. Unity through understanding, not through force." Marcus gestured to a seat. "Eat. The gathering will begin in an hour, but first, I want to hear your story from your own lips. Kaya has told me what she knows, but I want to hear how you see yourself. What drives you, what you want from life." Jake sat, accepting a plate of food that was brought by a young woman who smiled warmly at him. The meal was simple but delicious, real meat and vegetables grown under real sun. As he ate, he told his story, starting with his childhood on the Arizona colony. Through his years as a scout, the things he'd seen, the decisions he'd made. Marcus listened without interruption, his sharp eyes missing nothing. When Jake finished, the chief nodded slowly. "You've lived honestly, made hard choices without losing your principles. That's rare in this age. Do you know why Kaya really chose you?" "She said something about honor and tradition, about repaying a debt." "That's part of it," Marcus agreed. "But there's more. My daughter is brilliant, fierce, and stubborn. She could have her pick of warriors from our people. But she sees something in you that she believes our nation needs. A bridge to the corporations, to the mainstream of human expansion. Someone who understands both worlds but isn't corrupted by either." "I'm just a scout," Jake protested. "You're more than that, whether you know it or not. The question is, are you willing to become more? Because if you accept Kaya's offer, if you join our people, you won't just be her husband. You'll be a symbol, a representative, a leader in your own right." Jake felt the weight of those words. "What if I'm not ready for that?" "Then you'll grow into it, like every leader before you. Or you'll fail, and we'll deal with the consequences." Marcus leaned forward. "I'm going to be direct with you, Jake Carter. The galaxy is changing. The Crawl are becoming more aggressive. The corporations are consuming everything they touch, and smaller civilizations are being crushed between these forces. My people have survived by staying hidden, by maintaining our independence. But that strategy has limits. Eventually, we'll be found, we'll be pressured to join one side or another. When that happens, we need allies we can trust. You could be that ally. One man can't make that much difference. One man can change everything if he's in the right place at the right time. You proved that when you saved my daughter. You didn't think about politics or alliances, you just did what was right. That instinct, that basic decency, is what we need more of in this galaxy." Before Jake could respond, horns sounded outside the hall. The gathering was about to begin. People began filing in, taking their seats at the circular tables. Jake recognized the same quiet strength in all of them, a people united by shared values and common purpose. Kaya took the seat beside him, her hand briefly touching his. "Whatever happens, thank you for coming this far. It means more than you know." The gathering began with traditional songs, voices rising in harmony that spoke of Earth's past and humanity's journey to the stars. Then Marcus stood, and silence fell across the hall like a physical presence. "We gather today to honor tradition and plan for tomorrow, he began. We face challenges from all sides, but we face them together, as we always have. Today, we welcome a guest, a man who 17 years ago showed kindness to a lost child without expecting anything in return. That man is here now, brought by my daughter Kaya, and I ask that you welcome him as one of our own. Applause filled the hall, genuine and warm. Jake stood, acknowledging the greeting, feeling simultaneously honored and terrified by what he was stepping into. But we also face serious matters, Marcus continued, his tone growing grave. We have reports from our scouts that the Crow fleet is mobilizing, moving into territories they've never shown interest in before. The corporations are hiring mercenaries in unprecedented numbers. Something is shifting in the balance of power, and we must decide how to respond. A woman from across the circle stood. We've maintained our independence by avoiding these conflicts. Why should we change now? Because isolation only works until it doesn't, Kaya answered, rising to stand beside her father. I've traveled through corporate space, fought crawl raiders, seen what's happening on the frontier. The walls are closing in. If we wait too long, we won't have the luxury of choosing our path. Another voice, this time a young man with scars that marked him as a warrior. And what do you propose? That we ally with the corporations who would strip our world bare for profit? No, Kaya said firmly. I propose we build our own alliances with individuals and small nations who share our values. People like Jake Carter, who've proven they can live with honor even in a corrupt system. We create a network of allies, a coalition of the decent, and we use that to protect not just ourselves but others who refuse to compromise their principles. The debate raged for hours. Jake listened, learning more about galactic politics in those hours than he had in 12 years of scouting. He heard about resource disputes on the Outer Rim, about corporate black ops taking out competitors, about crawl expansion pushing dozens of smaller species into extinction. He heard about the thin line the Apache Nation walked, maintaining their independence through stealth and careful diplomacy. Finally, an elder stood, her voice carrying the weight of decades. The boy, Jake Carter. What does he say? What does he think of all this? All eyes turned to Jake. He stood slowly, feeling the pressure of the moment. I'm no politician or strategist, he began. I'm a scout, someone who explores and reports back. But in my years on the frontier, I've learned one thing for certain. The galaxy respects strength, yes, but it also respects integrity. The corporations have lost theirs somewhere along the way, buried it under profit margins and shareholder reports. The Crawl never had it, operating purely on might makes right philosophy. But you people, you've held on to something precious. You remember that strength without honor is just brutality. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Kaya asked me to come here, to consider joining your nation. I'll be honest, I still don't fully understand what that means. But I understand this. If I walk away, if I go back to my corporate contracts and frontier runs, I'll be walking away from the only people I've met in years who actually stand for something beyond survival and profit. So yeah, I'm willing to try. I'm willing to learn your ways, to be part of whatever you're building. Because even if we fail, at least we'll fail trying to do something right. Silence followed his words. Then Marcus began a slow clap that others joined. The approval was evident, though Jake could see skepticism in some faces. He didn't blame them. He was an outsider, untested, unknown beyond one act of kindness years ago. Then, it's settled, Marcus declared. Jake Carter will undergo the trials of adoption. If he succeeds, he becomes one of us, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. If he fails, Marcus let the implication hang. Kaya gripped Jake's hand tightly. You'll succeed, she whispered. I wouldn't have brought you here if I doubted that. The gathering continued late into the night, moving from serious debate to celebration as food and drink were brought out. Jake found himself surrounded by people eager to talk, to share stories, to test his knowledge and character through conversation. It was exhausting but exhilarating, like being back in the mess halls of his early scouting days, but with an intensity and purpose he'd never felt before. As the twin moons rose over Redstone, casting silver light through the hall's open windows, Jake found himself standing apart from the crowd for a moment, just breathing it all in. Kaya joined him, her presence comfortable and familiar despite the short time they'd known each other. Having second thoughts? She asked. About 1,000 of them, Jake admitted. But not about being here. It's something I didn't know I was looking for. My people have a saying. The path finds you when you're ready to walk it. You saved me all those years ago because you were ready to be the kind of person who saves people. Now you're here because you're ready to be part of something bigger. What are these trials your father mentioned? Tests of skill, endurance, and character. You'll face challenges that will push you to your limits and beyond. Some are physical, some mental, some spiritual. All are necessary to truly understand what it means to be part of the nation. And if I fail? You won't die, if that's what you're worried about, but you also won't be able to stay, won't be able to marry me or become one of us. You'd go back to your old life, and we'd go back to ours. Jake looked at her, really looked at her in the moonlight. Would that bother you? More than I'd like to admit, she said softly. I've been watching you, Jake Carter, learning about you for years before I made contact. I know it seems rushed, crazy even, but I feel like I already know you, like I've been waiting for you to catch up to where I am. That's a lot of pressure. Life is pressure. The question is whether you let it crush you or forge you into something stronger. She smiled. Besides, you've already survived 2 days with me. That's more than most men could handle. Jake laughed, genuine and free. Fair point. When do these trials begin? Tomorrow at dawn. You should get some rest. But sleep was the last thing on Jake's mind as he lay in the guest quarters they'd provided. His mind raced with everything that had happened, everything he'd learned, everything that awaited him. Somewhere in the darkness, he could hear the sounds of Redstone's forests. Animals he'd never heard before, making calls that were both alien and somehow familiar. He thought about his parents, long dead in a mining accident when he was young. About the corporate life that had raised him, trained him, sent him to the frontier. About the emptiness he'd felt despite the excitement of discovery, the sense that something was missing from his existence. Maybe Kaya was right. Maybe the path had found him. Maybe that lost girl in the desert had been more than just a random encounter. Maybe it had been the universe setting events in motion that were only now reaching their culmination. Or maybe he was overthinking everything, and tomorrow he'd fail spectacularly and be back on a corporate transport within a week. Either way, he was committed now. The cowboy from the frontier had found himself in a situation that no amount of training or experience could have prepared him for. All he could do was face it with the same honesty and courage that had defined his life so far. Dawn came too quickly. Jake woke to find Kaya waiting outside his quarters, dressed in simple training clothes. She looked fresh and energized despite the late night, while Jake felt like he'd been hit by a cargo hauler. First trial begins in 1 hour, she said. You'll want to eat something, but not too much. And dress for physical activity. What kind of physical activity? You'll see. An hour later, Jake found himself standing at the edge of a forest, surrounded by a dozen warriors in similar training gear. Marcus was there, along with several other leaders from the gathering. The morning air was cool, mist rising from the ground as the sun crept over the horizon. The first trial is simple in concept, difficult in execution, Marcus explained. You will navigate through the forest to the mountain peak you see in the distance. Along the way, you will face obstacles and challenges. Some will be physical barriers, others will be mental tests. You will be alone, with only your wits and skills to guide you. At the peak, you will find what you seek. What am I seeking? Jake asked. If you complete the trial, you'll know. If you don't, the question is irrelevant. Marcus gestured to the forest. You have until sunset. Begin. Jake started into the forest, immediately feeling the weight of eyes upon him. They were watching, judging, waiting to see if he would succeed or fail. The forest was dense, the undergrowth thick, but there were paths, barely visible trails that suggested the way forward. He followed them, his scout training kicking in, reading the signs in broken branches and disturbed soil. The first challenge came within the first mile. A river? Too wide to jump? Too deep to wade? No bridge? No obvious crossing point. Jake studied the problem, noticing vines hanging from trees on both sides. Not ideal, but workable. He tested the vines, found one that would hold his weight, and swung across, his muscles burning with the effort. On the far side he found a marker, a carved stone that confirmed he was on the right path. He pressed on, the terrain growing steeper, the forest thicker. Hours passed, marked by the sun's movement overhead. His water ran low, but he found a stream and refilled his container, remembering to purify it first despite the rush. The second challenge was mental. He entered a clearing where holographic projections created an illusion, a maze of paths that all looked identical. He could wander for hours trying each one, or he could think. He closed his eyes, using his other senses. Sound traveled differently through real forest versus holographic projection. He followed his ears, not his eyes, and found the true path. The third challenge nearly broke him. He reached a cliff face, sheer and smooth, with a rope hanging from the top. His arms were already tired from the vine swing, his legs burning from the climb, but there was no other way up. He gripped the rope and began to climb, hand over hand, fighting gravity and exhaustion. Halfway up, his hands started to slip. His muscles screamed for rest. Below him, a fall that would mean failure, possibly injury, but giving up wasn't in his nature. He thought about the little girl lost in the desert, about Kaya's trust in him, about the life he was fighting to claim. He forced himself upward, inch by agonizing inch. When he finally pulled himself over the edge, he lay gasping on solid ground for several minutes, his body a symphony of pain. But he was alive, and he was moving forward. The mountain peak was visible now, close but still far enough to be daunting. The sun was past its zenith when he finally reached the summit. There, in a circle of standing stones, he found what he sought. It was a weapon, a blade like Kaya's but different, clearly crafted for him. Beside it lay a piece of living metal, pulsing with potential energy, waiting to be bonded. And standing beside these gifts was Marcus Redhawk. "You made it," the chief said. "Faster than I expected, actually. Most candidates take 2 days." Jake collapsed onto a stone, his chest heaving. "There's a 2-day option? There's no time limit. I said sunset to motivate you, but the real test is whether you complete it at all." Marcus sat beside him. "You did well, Jake Carter. Better than well. You thought through problems instead of just trying to muscle through them. That's the mark of a true warrior. I feel more like a survivor than a warrior right now." Often the same thing. Marcus picked up the blade, studying it in the sunlight. "This was crafted for you based on what Kaya told us about you. It's not as old as hers, but it's made with the same techniques, the same care. If you choose to accept it, you'll undergo the bonding ceremony, and it will be yours for life. And the metal? For your ship. Every member of our nation has a vessel, bonded to them as intimately as the blade. It takes time to grow it, to shape it, but when it's complete, you'll have a companion for the stars." Jake looked at the gifts, at Marcus, at the world spread out below him. From this height, he could see the settlements scattered across the landscape, the ships in orbit, the careful balance between civilization and nature that the Apache nation had achieved. "I accept," he said. "Whatever comes next, I'm ready for it." Marcus smiled, a rare expression that transformed his stern face. "Good, because the hard part is just beginning." The bonding ceremony took place that night under the 3 moons of Redstone. Jake stood in a circle of warriors, the blade held before him as Marcus led the ritual in the old language. He didn't understand the words, but he felt their power, felt something shift in his relationship with the weapon. When Marcus finally placed it in his hands, Jake felt a connection he couldn't describe, like the blade was an extension of himself. The living metal bonding was more intense. They placed the small piece of metal in his hands, and it immediately began to warm, to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. He felt it probe his mind, learning who he was, what he valued, how he thought. It was invasive and intimate at the same time, but he didn't resist. Trust was necessary for this to work. When it was over, the metal had grown, spreading across his palms before forming into a small sphere that continued to pulse with inner light. "It will grow as you do," Kaya explained. "Feed it your intentions, your dreams, and it will shape itself accordingly. In a year, maybe less, you'll have your ship." The celebrations continued late into the night, but Jake found himself drawn away from the crowds, needing quiet to process everything that had happened. He walked to a cliff overlooking the valley, his new blade at his side, the living metal sphere warm in his pocket. Kaya found him there, as he knew she would. "You did it," she said. "You're one of us now." "I still don't feel like I belong," Jake admitted. "Like I'm playing a role I don't quite understand." "That's normal. Belonging isn't instant. It's built over time through shared experiences and trust. You've started that process, but there's still a long way to go." "And the marriage? Is that still part of the plan?" Kaya moved to stand beside him, her shoulder touching his. "If you want it to be. The life debt is repaid through your acceptance into the nation. The marriage would be something else, something we both choose freely." "I barely know you." "True, but we have time now. Time to learn each other, to see if what I felt watching you from afar translates to reality. No pressure, no expectations beyond what we create together." Jake turned to face her, studying her profile in the moonlight. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone more, mystical? Otherworldly?" "You're fierce and capable, but you're also practical and direct." "It's refreshing." Kaya laughed. "We're human, Jake, just humans who chose a different path. We have the same hopes and fears as anyone else, we just express them differently." "Fair enough." Jake paused, gathering courage. "I'd like to try. Not rushing into anything, but getting to know you, seeing where this leads. Is that acceptable?" "More than acceptable." She took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his. "Welcome home, cowboy." They stood there together as the night deepened around them. Two people from different worlds finding common ground under alien stars. Below them, the Apache nation celebrated, their songs rising into the darkness. Above them, ships moved in orbital patterns, silent guardians of a civilization that refused to compromise its values. Jake felt something he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. He felt like he belonged somewhere, was part of something larger than himself. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The frontier scout had found his home, not in the corporate stations or mining outposts he'd known, but in a place that honored the past while embracing the future. And beside him stood a woman who'd crossed the stars to repay a simple act of kindness, who saw in him something worth fighting for. The galaxy was still dangerous, still full of threats and challenges. The Crawl were still expanding, the corporations still consuming. But for the first time in his life, Jake felt ready to face those challenges, not as a lone scout, but as part of a community, a family, a nation. Tomorrow would bring new trials, new lessons to learn. But tonight, under the 3 moons of Redstone, Jake Carter allowed himself to simply be present, to accept the strange and wonderful turn his life had taken. Kaya leaned her head against his shoulder. You know, when I was 12 and lost in that desert, I was terrified. But when you found me, when you shared your water and led me home, I felt something shift, like the universe was telling me that there were still good people out there, still reasons to have faith in humanity. I was just doing what anyone should do. But most wouldn't have. That's the point. You chose kindness when you could have chosen convenience. You chose to help when you could have walked away. That choice 17 years ago led us both here, to this moment. Makes you wonder what other choices are setting futures in motion that we can't even imagine. Jake thought about that, about the ripples that spread from every decision. So what happens now? I'm part of your nation. I'm learning your ways. But what's my role in all this? Your father mentioned something about being a bridge between worlds. That's part of it, but not all. The truth is, we don't know exactly what your role will be. Life isn't a corporate flowchart with defined positions and expectations. You'll find your place through action, through the choices you make and the challenges you face. Maybe you'll become a diplomat, maybe a warrior, maybe something we don't even have a name for yet. Comforting, Jake said dryly. Life isn't about comfort, it's about growth. You'll figure it out, just like you figured out how to cross that river and climb that cliff. They fell into comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Jake recognized some constellations from his training, but others were new, visible only from this world. Each point of light represented possibilities, worlds waiting to be explored, challenges waiting to be faced. Finally, Kaya stirred. We should get some rest. Tomorrow you begin your real education, learning our history, our techniques, our way of seeing the universe. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is, Jake replied, a phrase he'd learned from his first commanding officer years ago. It had never felt more true than it did now. They walked back to the settlement together, hand in hand, 2 people starting a journey that would change both their lives in ways neither could predict. Behind them, the mountains stood silent and strong. Ahead, the future waited, full of promise and peril in equal measure. Jake Carter, frontier scout turned adopted member of the Apache Nation of the Stars, smiled as he walked. The cowboy had been found by the girl he'd saved, and in saving him from his lonely existence, she'd given him something he'd been searching for all along. A reason to fight for something bigger than himself, a home worth defending, and maybe, just maybe, a love worth building a life around. The 3 moons of Redstone shone down on them both, silent witnesses to a bond forged in kindness and strengthened through honor. The galaxy would continue its dance of chaos and order, but here, in this moment, 2 souls had found their path. And that, Jake thought, was enough.